about yourself, Marilyn, and what you might like readers to know about you in particular.
Well, I had a very traumatic, stressful life growing up, and in my marriage I was in domestic violence as a child, and as in my marriage, because that was familiar, I married what I was used to. And so I did not know for a long time why my life was so terrible, horrible, and awful. I went to church ever since I was a child, 5 years old. I remember being baptized even. And so, I would go to church, but I'd come home on Sunday afternoon after church and still be beat up at home by my husband. And when I was a child, the abuse went on, and at Sunday school, children would talk about all the great things that were going on with them, and I just sat there very subdued and knew that that wasn't going to happen for me, that I wasn't good enough. And so I lived a life of despair, and it was very sad and lonely. Because of the abuse, including, it was not just physical, but physical, mental, emotional, and sexual abuse I went through. And I was just a walking zombie, actually, most of my life. So I just was existing. It was like I didn't have any answers. My mother was mentally ill, paranoid schizophrenic, and so when I did approach her at one time about the incest, she says, well, don't feel that way. And so I shut down feeling, because you weren't supposed to feel. And my father was, my real dad was an alcoholic, and they fought every night, so they weren't there for me. One night I saw my dad beat up my mom instead of just hear it through the walls, and I went into a little turtle shell of protection, and there I stayed very well, like Peter Pumpkin Eater. And so I lived in that protection of trying to save myself and be safe. And so even though I went to church and Sunday school and taught Sunday school and sang in the choir, did all what you were supposed to be doing, I'm a retired school teacher. I taught for 30 years. I've even taught kindergarten through college. My certification gave me that ability. I did a lot of things that were very outstanding at times in my life and got awards, valedictorian. I soloed with a symphony, but all this time I was this little 3-year-old stuck inside. And so when I went off to college, I found a fellow I could talk with. And turned out after we were married that I'd married the same personalities and characteristics that I'd been raised with. It was like a magnet attracting the same thing. And so I didn't know how to get out of it. Finally, I went to the doctor because the anxiety was so bad, and I got Valium. Didn't know that one drink and one pill would be 6 times the effect, and that they were addicting, because I came from an alcoholic family, and that was typically normal, so I never even thought of being genetically predisposed to being an alcoholic, and that the Valium was the ultra-dry martini in my life. And I married an alcoholic that was a psychopath, rageaholic, and sex addict, and that was my family background, because my stepfather was an alcoholic, I believe today, and closet drinker and rageaholic, but it was a sex addict. And so all that energy and emotional suppression, what I found out is any sexual abuse, I've been through incest, molestation, and emotional incest, and all of that shuts you off from the sunlight of God. It becomes a dark blanket of fear, and I was walking in that fear, guilt, and shame. And so at one point my domestic violent marriage was becoming so bad that I tried suicide several times, and then he tried to kill me several times. And then the night I knew I wasn't going home alive, that night, through a car ride that was a maniac ride. He was a maniac on both sides of the road down the middle, stopped. We almost had 2 head-on collisions. It scared the dickens out of me, and I prayed to God. And my church always said the prayers out of the hymnal, but that night I said, God, please help me. I really don't want to die. And he was off the road in minutes, passed out over the wheel, and within days, opportunities to work out of my situation started appearing in my life. answers that I had no idea that were even available. I'd never heard of 12-step programs. I'd never even thought of counseling because I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know you went to a counselor. All kinds of opportunities started opening up for me. And so through the last 30 years, I have been kind of becoming a spiritual person, and that means I use faith in my life because I don't have to be motivated from the fear. Some people say fear is false emotions appearing real, and I have come to understand that fear is an illusion, and it really stops me from the love that I always wanted in my life, and to not listen to it or abide by it, but to move into faith and do it anyway. A year and a half ago, I faced my last fear. I didn't want to go up there's a huge Ferris wheel in downtown Seattle on the waterfront. And I'd had a really panicky experience as a 6th grader in an octopus ride. And I just would never go up on something like that again. And so my significant other wanted to go up for his birthday, and I said, no way. And I talked to my friend, and who I do hypnotherapy and past life regression, and she does too. She's my teacher. She says, oh, I'll hypnotize you so you can go up. And I says, oh, well, it hadn't dawned on me that was the answer. So I said, well, if that's the case, I can go into hypnosis, which is meditation. So I went into meditation and found out that that's why I was so scared, was because of the 6th grade experience. And that I today have taught classes for years on spiritual empowerment and realized immediately, well, I'll just substitute the faith for the fear, and I'll be able to go up in the arms of God, and I'll be safe. And I went up in the Ferris wheel, and he said that, about 4 or 5 times I wouldn't go, and I said, oh, I'm going to go with you up on the Ferris wheel, and he looked at me very surprised. When we actually got to the waterfront, and it was getting darker than I expected because of traffic problems, and I had my camera to take pictures, and I thought, oh my gosh, the sun's setting, and I'm not going to get very good pictures, because I lived in a beautiful spot where Puget Sound in the water, and the ferries, and that's on the Seattle, on the edge of this beautiful salt sea, Puget Sound, and it's gorgeous for pictures, and mountains in the background is lovely, and I was going to get pictures, and so as we went up the Ferris wheel, the sun started to set, and out, as we hit the top of the Ferris wheel, this gorgeous, gorgeous orange sky appeared, and everything was orange. The water reflected orange, the windows on the buildings reflected orange, and it was a totally orange sky, and I got pictures of it, and that's going to be on the cover of my coming book, Paradigm Busters, Reveal the Real You. And I found out in meditation a year later that orange sky represents Christ consciousness. So I'm here to say that you can face your fears and move out of them and become fearless. And my life has changed completely into being free of the past trauma, drama, crisis. And I became a therapist to help people do this, and I've been helping others do this now for quite a few years. When you find the root cause of the problem, you can heal it with a loving solution, and you don't have to live in it anymore. So fear for me what was missing is I equate it to a toaster on my kitchen counter, and the other day it dawned on me. I said, gee, if you put toast in the toaster, it just stays there. But if you plug in the toaster to the electricity, you can push it down and it'll pop up toast. And that's what was missing way back in those old years, was my connection to a higher consciousness of reality and love. And I didn't know how to connect. I didn't know how to do that in those days.
Knocking on my door.
Oh.
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Hold on a second. Did you knock one? Did you knock? Did you need to come in? Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, now, go ahead. So, can you tell me once more what the orange sky represented? Because I didn't catch that.
It represents Christ consciousness, which is another term for unconditional love. I have discovered the terms in the Bible are very important. They're metaphors for language that people 2,000 years ago would not understand. So when they call it spirit, it's an energy, positive, benevolent energy force that's within all of us, and that's the Father and I are one. This means we're all having that benevolent energy in us. It's a matter of peeling away all the things that block it. So what's left is the energy of love in our lives. That unconditional love is in all of us, and it's been just blocked by the various trauma and drama that we've gone through, and in my case, trying to protect myself all these years. And so I have come to understand that the biggest protection I had was about the sexual abuse. And I actually experienced recently where it was like a sliding glass door, and the black of the door slid to the side, and it opened up to the light of God coming through the opening that was remaining. And so I see that fear is a very, very big blockage to our not being connected to that energy force. And my book gives details of how to literally move through all the obstacles that separate us from that energy of love. Excuse me, I'm going to cough.
You need some water?
I have some right here, thank you.
Okay. So while you're taking a sip of water, I have so many questions. Okay. Ultimately, if I'm understanding you right, you came through this by connecting to your source, and your source is Christ. And so I'm wondering what the resistance was from you reaching that connection, because you said that, in your earlier life you went to church, you were bitter, but it just didn't happen. Why did you think the Christ connection took so long, and what was the turning point?
Very good question. It's a complex answer. I was not. My church was very fundamental Lutheran, and they didn't talk really about anything except that you were supposed to be a good person, but they didn't tell you how. And so I didn't understand till just recently that Christ consciousness is another term for unconditional love. And that's what was missing in my childhood and growing up in marriage, was there was no love. I was never a nurtured child because the people I grew up around couldn't love themselves, they couldn't love me. And I had to find the love within, and through 12-step programs in counseling and regression and past lives and all the work I've done on myself to find out what's the root cause of these situations, I could remove all the barriers to that unconditional love that is my inheritance as a child of God. I was created in that loving spirit, but it's my human experiences have covered it up. And so it's just for me to peel back, you might like to say peel back the onion, or to uncover what's been buried. And so as I did the work on myself to get totally I discovered the reason my mother was mentally ill was she couldn't be honest with herself. I read a book called People of the Lie by Scott Peck, who wrote The Road Less Traveled, and in there he said that's how you determine how mentally ill a person is. The label is to the degree that they are not honest with themselves. So I vowed on the spot to be as perfectly honest with myself as I could, because I did not want to be mentally ill like my mother. Now, as I became honest with myself, I took responsibility for everything I created in my life, and everything on earth I created through, since I do past life regressions, and I do know that reincarnation for me was real, I was able to go back and find where those incidences were that separated me off from God, that I had created, and I came this lifetime to remove them. That's why I like doing past lives, because so many of us are here to remove the last parts of our lives that are still needing to come to the surface for our conscious awareness. And so I was able to go back and see what I had caused in my life that I needed to change. Some people call it karma. Some people call it cause and effect, but I had to change the cause. And so in doing that, my life started becoming much better. I started to actually be able to live in the kindness and the caring, they call it fruits of the Spirit, and that was what I started giving out instead of the fear and the trauma and drama I was perpetuating and passing out to those around me. I started changing into being a more loving, aware person of what I was doing, and as I forgave those people in my life, they literally came here to give me the opportunity to change that energy. That's what life's about. So when I asked them to come and play these parts in my life, when I realized my ex-husband, he came to me in meditation one day and said, you know how hard it was for me to play that part because I really didn't want to do that, but you needed someone to do that, and I loved you so much I did it. And when I realized that, what a very terrifying childhood he had, to be able to play the part he did, I went into compassion. And I thanked him for doing that for me. I took responsibility for setting the whole thing up. And when I thanked him, all my problems around and issues around him left. When I thanked my stepdad for coming and being and playing that part of years and years and years of emotional incest, and this took years to go through and be able to handle it. It doesn't happen overnight. But when I took responsibility and thanked him, all of a sudden the emotional incest problems, PTSD situations, were no longer an issue. When I take responsibility for my life, I can't put it off on anybody. I can't play victim one more time. I just don't choose to go through that misery of what it brings to me. I'd rather produce a loving, caring situation. And in my family, I have actually turned a lot of situations around into very harmony, joyous connections and relationships today that before were very disastrous and very dysfunctional. But as I change, everything around me changes. The only thing I can change is me. And so faith for me is everything. Every morning I say, God, there isn't anything...
Sorry, I have workers in my house.
Oh.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Okay, every morning I say, God, there isn't anything you and I together can't handle today. And so I bring that faith consciously into my life every morning and ask for God to guide my thoughts, words, and actions.
Okay.
And then I ask I found out we're all whole spirits, and I ask the Holy Spirit to be in my life for the next 24 hours, and that puts me into maturity. Instead of that wounded little child who didn't have any faith, I can move around in my life today as a mature whole person, and the Holy Spirit is with me, and I'm not afraid of things. I'm not afraid of I'm not really afraid of dying or speaking in front of groups because I've taught all my life. I've performed in front of audiences all my life. I've discovered, for me, the biggest fear was to let love into my life, because my stepdad beat me with a 2x4 when I was in junior high school, and I was trying so hard to be perfect so that kind of thing wouldn't happen to me, because I literally was a Cinderella. I could go into details about that. But I said to him, I screamed out, I said, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? And he says, well, I'm only doing this because I love you. So if love hurts, I shut down my heart completely, strongly, severely. I am going through pains that are not heart attacks. I am going through pains with my chakra, heart chakra, opening to that love that scared the dickens out of me because I didn't want to be hurt, but to open up to the real love of the energy and the universe is absolutely beautiful, and I have gone into that space often today. I've become a medium and a psychic because of it. Your energy and consciousness raises into it. So it just is one of the rewards of opening up your loving heart to the universe. And so the more you open up your heart, knock, knock on the door of your heart and open it up and let that love out, and it's not going to hurt. There's nothing to be afraid of if you're in the arms of God. You're in the presence of God, and I always have been. I just was not taught that. And so I believed in a lot of beliefs. I don't have beliefs today. I just know that God, or the infinite source, loves me completely, always has. They were just experiences and lessons I had to have to realize that and walk through it to clean the energy into that loving presence that is in my heart and always has been. And the more, trust God, clean the house, and help others, the more you give from your heart, the more comes back. And it just becomes bountiful. I've had experiences of prosperity and abundance in my life where I just saw, the only person stopping it was me and my fear, and I don't have to have that fear today. So I can live in the fruits of the Spirit today. The abundance, prosperity, love, harmony, and balance is coming into my life in a very real way today. And it's no longer hell on earth, it's becoming heaven on earth.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. You certainly deserve to feel that joy and that love and that peace. And after what you described, when you were talking about forgiving your husband and your stepfather for the roles that they played, it reminded me of the work by Helen Mace. Is that how she pronounces her last name? Where the medical intuitive, and she writes about soul contracts, where before we're even incarnate into the physical bodies, that we actually have these spiritual contracts with each other about how to help play the roles that are needed to be played in order for our continued evolution and development, and to achieve whatever spiritual progress we need to achieve.
Well, that's my experience. That's exactly. And the beautiful part, there's a wonderful children's story that's written by Donald Neil Walsh, who wrote Conversations with God. And I use it in some of my classes. And the gist of the story is this one little angel is talking to another little angel, and she says, I want to go down and experience love. And the other little angel says, well, I'll go down and help you.
Oh, that's really, really sweet. So let's talk about love for a minute. But I want to talk about self-love.
Mm-hmm.
Self-love is so powerful. And, there's the adage that, if you don't love yourself, then no one else can. Talk to me about your feelings about self-love, and when and how you discovered to really, really love yourself first.
Oh, what a wonderful question. Well, I didn't have any self-love as a child, that's obvious. In fact, I saw myself as a scale of 0 to 10. I saw myself as a -5. That's where I came from. So self-love was totally out of the park. When I went to treatment for codependency and addiction, they told us to write a list of the positive things about ourselves, and I couldn't. I didn't have a clue of except that I was a teacher. I could write down I was a teacher. That's the only thing I could put down. And by that time, I'd achieved a lot of accomplishments, actually. So I heard somebody say, you don't have to volunteer to be a victim anymore. And somehow that really clicked with me. And I started to find affirmations where I could start affirming the truth of who I am. This is one of the first papers they passed out at the codependent treatment, was affirmations, and they were things that you could talk to and say to yourself every day so that you could start building some self-love. And then in going to 12-step programs, you're there to help others and be of service, and what you give away is what comes back. So as you're helping others, you start getting a sense of confidence and a sense of belonging and a sense of contributing, and being somebody there to help someone else is Edgar Casey says the way you go to heaven is on the arm of the person you help. So as you start finding that you have that, in my case, value and worth, and that I can have a life that isn't painful and miserable, I can walk out of the suffering. Gradually, my self-love just been through meditation. I meditate every day, and sometimes all day. I have come into learning how much loved I am in the universe, and I guess the ultimate answer was just a couple weeks ago. I have a hard time finding the positives about myself and seeing myself worth even yet. And about 2 weeks ago, I went to a play called How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. It's a beautiful, sweet little play from the 60s. And the fellow that's the lead in the play sang to himself in the mirror, "I believe in you." And it was like he was singing to me. It was for the first time in my life I actually felt that I believed in myself. It was an amazing experience. God seems to put these experiences in my life for feedback because I'm a little slow sometimes picking it up. So when he sang that, it was like I had moved into a place where I do believe in myself today, and I believe what I'm doing is very much what you're doing, too. You sound like you're very much on the same path I am, which I think is terrific. And you know, my book is the details of how to move into this space that we're talking about today, where everybody is a Christ-conscious person. In reality, we are all created into Christ consciousness. That's really what Christmas is about. And that we were all born in that Christ consciousness. It's our returning to it that is the challenge. And Earth is our option to be able, people really do sign up to come to Earth because you can change your energy quicker on this planet than other planets or other places. And there isn't any negative energy in what people call heaven, which is really nirvana. There's levels of consciousness in nirvana, and there isn't any negativity. But so it's very, very slow to change your consciousness in spirit. So as you come into a human form, and these contracts, as you were saying, are acted out, we've already written what we're going through. It's just a matter of the trick is, are you going to react like a victim, or are you going to respond in a loving way? So what is the most loving thing for the other person and for me? That's what that's kind of one of my mantras. What's the most loving thing I can do in this situation? And that's why I'm here, is to change that negative energy, is to respond this time in positive. One of my big overcomings was my half-sister stole my inheritance from her mother, and when I went into past lives, discovered that what I had done to her in a past life was even worse. I actually got off pretty scot-free by her just taking the money. I was, 2,000 years ago, she was in my harem, and I was a male, and I had not been, she kept running away, and so I punished her. And it was not a very happy thing that I did. It was very cruel. And so this was her lifetime to come back and get her revenge, you might say. And today I have forgiven her, and we actually have a friendship that I didn't think we could have. So we can come into awareness that we created these things and that we have to move through them in loving responses. And if I had gone after her legally, I would have just kept the game going. And this is my last lifetime in third dimension. I have moved out of third dimension primarily, and I don't choose to keep going through the trials and tribulations of the past. My spiritual mentor says I have healed 7 lives of violence in this lifetime, so that's why it was so heavy duty. But I don't choose to go back and keep recreating it. I'm choosing to move forward.
Wow, that's really some heavy stuff. So I have to ask you a question, and I've been trying to figure out the best way to move forward with it. But being as inclusive with readers as I can possibly be, there's spirituality and there's religion, and you speak, you say that you are spiritual, but I also hear religion in that you refer to Christian, beliefs. And so how, for someone maybe who does not embrace Christianity, how can they achieve the same things that you're talking about within their own spiritual environment?
That's an excellent question, which I address in my book. There is a difference between religion and spirituality. However, spirituality does use religious terms, so you can change the meaning to mean anything you want. When I came into the understanding, I could change the word God for good and presence for feelings, and the consciousness of thinking. I can think and feel good today It has nothing to do with church. It has to do with what's inside of me. Churches have dogma, and that's man-made rules, and I don't abide by them, period. I've discovered I just don't fit in churches because I don't limit my thinking today. So spirituality doesn't limit your thinking, but you can use terms or replace those religious terms with terms. I know what you're saying, because semantics is the biggest problem in this whole issue. Actually, science and religion is the same thing, or spirituality. They're all talking about this energy force that's invisible and powerful, and it's just different terms for the same thing. So when you change the words, if you're changing them as a synonym, you can find, and I have a chart in my book which actually shows you words that mean the same thing, but you can use them that are spiritually oriented rather than religiously oriented, but they mean the same thing. So it depends on how the person wants to use the word. What does it mean to them in their heart? When they get out of their head, which is religion, in my opinion, which is because it's man-made and comes from rules, and when you get into your heart, you can open up your understanding of those words to be much more encompassing and loving and more expansive, and it isn't limited to one person's definition. It's limited to what it means to you inside of your heart. And today, when I talk of God, I'm not talking about a person. I'm talking about that energy that's in all living things. Every blade of grass, rock. I can talk to trees and rocks. I've had that experience. That energy is in all of us. But God is a term that most people identify with because that's acceptable for most people and where they're coming from. And I know some people take offense to that term, and I try to stay as neutral, you might say, as possible, calling it love, the spirit of love. Not anybody I've found yet. Well, I shouldn't say that. I do have some relatives that can't understand love, but from the churches they're going to. But most people say, oh, do you believe in love? Well, yes. Well, it's whatever term you want to give it.
Right. You're good. Yeah, that's very, very helpful. And absolutely, we're on the same path here. In fact, I'm holding on to a beautiful round stone as we have this conversation, because I find so much grounding energy in stones and rocks, and but being a communicator with trees and nature, and it's very much connecting every morning with the energy of the earth, and so I think that we have very, very much in common. So I appreciate you giving some clarity around the use of the word God and Christ and so forth. So, okay, let's see.
Yeah, one of the problems is people 2,000 years ago really were not sophisticated enough to understand vibrations can be raised into higher consciousness than loving unconditional love. So they used terms people could understand 2,000 years ago, and so Christ consciousness was just another way to say unconditional love, and most people will understand that.
Wonderful. So, what kind of mindset, Marilyn, would you say that it takes to release the past and to reprogram one's thinking so that they can, in fact, choose courage?
That is a super question, because it's all about your mindset. If you heaven is just a state of mind, and hell is just a state of mind. And in my case, I had to surrender to the energy of God, or the love of God, to come into my life and be the sole instigator of my being. And it was because, in my case, it was to live or die. I'm in the last stages because of the doctors are actually giving out toxic, poisonous, I don't know where you are on this, but anyway, in my case, the medicines they were giving me were actually killing me. My body said I was dying. It was dark inside, and I'm in the last stages of what would be described as alcoholism. And so it was either a choice to live or die, and in that choice, I literally got on my knees at one point and said, God, I really don't want to die. And I had to say that from my heart, not just my head. I had chosen to surrender at one point just through words, and it wasn't really working. I have to mean it, not just say it. So it's not what you say that counts, it's where's it coming from, how deep inside of you was, in my case, desperate to say, I don't want to die. And today I know we don't die because Spirit's forever, but in those days I didn't understand that. So my mindset changed to saying, I was open to anything that would help me change and move into a higher consciousness. And that's, my book is every chapter is a chapter on principles you can apply to your life to bring your mindset into a higher consciousness, a higher thinking than third dimension, which is duality. Nothing is right and wrong, good and bad, or critical. My mother was very critical and judgmental and condemning. I was condemned by my step-grandmother, definitely. I was told that she would not look at me as a grandchild because I was not of her blood, and I was treated that way. So, I was condemned. Jesus never condemned anyone. He was just, he didn't come to save us in my understanding today. He came to show us how we can outgrow that mindset and ascend into a higher consciousness of unconditional love. He's my example. He's my, you might say, higher brother, older brother. And what he did was he released his ego. Now, my last book, The Real Meaning of 2012, talks about how you can reduce the influence of the ego, edging God out. So when you edge God out and you start merging that love in to replace that void, then your mindset changes. And there's several ways that are very applicable to doing that, which I've referred to some of them, which is, of course, past life regression, affirmations. I use flower essences very often with my clients because it changes the negative emotional energy. You can also use acupuncture, and I do Qigong with my clients. I use Chinese herbs in my life. I use tuning forks to bring my energy into higher consciousness. There's lots of ways. So what Jesus literally died to is ego, so that God was the soul of his existence and being, and that's the real message. So that he rose from the dead. Third dimension, we're going to die if we are critical and judgmental, but there is no criticism and judgment in fifth dimension. Fourth dimension is just this, like Jacob's ladder, it just is the progression into fifth dimension. You become God conscious more and more and more until you have ascended into a higher mindset, which I like to describe as heaven on earth, because there's no criticism, judgment, and condemnation. My mother would say to me, "What's wrong with me?" And I said, "Well, why are you doing that?" And she says, "Well, if I don't tell you what's wrong with you, who will?" And in meditation several months back, I was told, "Marilyn, there's nothing wrong with you, and there never has been. You are a good person." And when we come into that mindset, we are free.
Absolutely. That sounds great. So you actually answered my next question, and I was going to ask you the kinds of exercises and processes that you recommend for people to use, and you talked about meditation and affirmations and acupuncture and Qigong and all that stuff. Where would you suggest someone start? Because there's a lot of different stuff that you listed off. Where would you say we should start?
Well, that's a very good question, because what I didn't mention was our food supply has become so extremely toxic. And anything in your body that is toxic, poisonous, or lethal or whatever, is going to stop that energy that you're trying to achieve. That positive energy is stopped, just like that black sliding glass door. The light of God can't come through. And you were talking about grounding, and you can actually go out in the grass and walk in the grass. That's grounding. You can walk in the sand. That would be grounding. But if you're very careful about your food supply, I grow a little garden so I can have organic food. And I've come to understand that your body needs an alkaline balance, not just acidic. And most people have a lot of sugar in their system, and they eat a lot of things that are not actually producing a healthy mind. So you can think rational. I was working with one woman, and I took her to the store. She didn't have a car that day, and I saw what she was picking out for her family, and she had food stamps. And I said, it was costing, the stuff she was going to put in her kids were literally not going to be helpful. And so I helped her reselect things, and she called me a couple days later, and she says, Marilyn, she says, I'm thinking better.
Oh, wow. Well, you know they do that because it's cheaper.
Well, no, there is, this, I don't want to upset anybody's apple cart, but there is a force, a dark force that has been perpetuating the population depletion and control and manipulation of the planet, and they have purposely done this to all parts of our life. In my book, I address not just the health profession is actually providing things that are not healthy, such as prescriptions. They are toxic. They don't necessarily actually bring health. They actually work against our health. The school systems are taught, when I was a teacher, we didn't teach this way, but now you teach to the test, and so therefore people are failures. Well, that again depletes their self-esteem. We always taught so the child was always successful, and no matter what he did, because success breeds success. So the schools have definitely been infiltrated. Medicine's been infiltrated. Religions are definitely leaving out the answers that bring us into a higher consciousness by calling people sinners and hell. Those are shaming and controlling mechanisms. So, and our government is, the more laws they pass, the less freedom we have. So we have been conditioned in third dimension, but we came here to overcome this, rise above it into a higher consciousness, so what goes around you does not have to influence you. You are independent of, in my case, it's like I don't look at those third dimensional situations and react from them. I choose to think outside of the box and take action that is in my best interest and most loving interest. And it's like those issues are not part of my life like they used to be. I walked away from medicine because of my situation. I'm trying to help people like you become educated, that we can think in ways that do not become, don't have to be victimized by the government and by medicines and by, the foods we eat and whatever. We can actually, if you pray over your food, you can actually raise the energy. If you use microwaves, pray over your food to raise the energy. We can raise our energy into so many better ways for us by just checking our thinking. If you start to think about being jealous about somebody, well, you have everything you need. You don't, right now, people usually have a roof over their head, food on the plate at dinner that night, and they're usually able to get to places they need to for work. We don't need to be jealous. We have just right what we need in our lives right now that's important for us. So when we start looking at not what others have, but what we have, and start having gratitude, that's probably one of the biggest things that's helped me. Is the attitude of gratitude. Yeah, my mother was a very sick lady, and she was poor me, and I learned that very well. And so I wake up in gratitude today. Today is the day the Lord hath made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. And if you understand, the word Lord means the law of love, and that's again back in the biblical days. They didn't understand love, so when Jesus came to dispel and bring that announcement, they still didn't understand what it was. We are the ones on earth today that get to actually live in that mindset of love. He came to expose it so people would be becoming aware that it was possible, but we're moving into fifth dimension on this planet. In fact, the planet is, when I channel, as a medium, the planet is already moved back into Christ consciousness. All we have to do is align ourselves back to where we started originally as one with God.
Wonderful. Yeah, I feel that energetic shift as well. So what would you like to leave the reader with, knowing that those that pick up this book are going to be grappling with some issues of fear, and it could be, any kind, it could be related to relationships or business or anything. What would you like to leave that reader with?
Well, I guess since you're talking about fear, one of the best tools I came across was to say, please remove this fear and replace it with love and grace. And as I consciously released whatever fear it was and replaced it, because nature abhors the void, and so not just to let anything come into your mind, because it will, But to consciously, right up, I was told to do this in meditation, to consciously right up front, immediately replace it with love and grace. And I'll never forget the first time I felt grace from head to toe. I was meditating at Death Valley. And we literally can change our mind by releasing that. And you'd mentioned that I go into the Bible things, but this is one of the examples Jesus had, was when he said, Satan, get thee behind me. That's what he was doing. He was releasing the negative energy so that it wouldn't be influencing his life, and so that he would be that unconditionally loving person. So we can do it ourselves every time we recognize the fear comes up, to say, please remove, I say, God, please remove this fear of what, and be specific. You have to list each individual fear. I was in a trip to Europe. I went to the sites of Mother Mary on a trip, and my car had been stolen. And I got the phone call when they found it, and I said in meditation, I said, well, what was all this about, my car being stolen? And they said, well, Marilyn, you listed all these fears over the years and removed them, but you forgot the fear of your car being stolen, because that was at a time when I was divorced, and I didn't have a husband's car for a backup if I lost my car and then, needing repairs or whatever. So I was afraid that here I would be on foot without a car, and I had that fear. So guess what? Whatever you're afraid of, you attract that. So to release it is the smartest thing you can do, and attract the love that replaces it.
So this is a little bit off topic, but I'm curious, so I hope you don't mind if I add this question in.
No problem.
I worked with a shaman many years ago, and one of the questions that I asked her was about evil. And I came to introduce the concept of evil because when I was growing up, my grandfather was a Southern Baptist preacher, and so we kind of had that kind of indoctrination, although my parents themselves were not very active in the church at all. But when I asked the question about evil, where does the evil come from, to my shaman, who was also a teacher for me, she said that there really is no evil, that there's just energy. And so I'd really like to hear your perspective on that, because it sounds like it might be a little bit different.
Well, I think she's right. My understanding of it today is evil is the lack of light. It's the darkness. If people stay in their fear, they're going to be in darkness, and they act from that, which would be passing out their greed and fear and manipulation and control and all the 7 deadly sins. And so if you're coming from fear, you're coming from the lack of love, and you're hurting others and yourself, actually, because it comes back to get you. And so that darkness is what we're trying to dispel. And so as you change to bringing more light into your life, every time you say, I release this fear of whatever it is, going up the wheel or whatever it was, the Ferris wheel, and replace it with your love and grace, you move yourself into more light in your life. And everything you can do, and you eat more food that's organic, so it's not toxic, anything you can do like prayer and meditation, anything that raises your energy into a higher level of light and vibration. It's all about vibration. And so when people can come into, that's why I love tuning forks, when you can come into higher vibration, you're going to leave that darkness behind. You just moved out of it. It's like walking into a dark room and turning on the light. Where's it go?
Have you ever done tonal chanting?
No, just my teacher had me do it a few times. I just didn't kind of connect with that.
Didn't resonate? Yeah. Okay. Well, I've done that before, and I really, really like it. I've never tried the tuning fork, but maybe I'll give that a whirl too. I do like anything vibrational that I can connect with. So, Marilyn, I want to be mindful of the time, and I'm so grateful for all that you shared with me. Just such an amazing woman. I hope that if I'm ever in Seattle, that I can pick you up, and that maybe we can meet and have lunch. That would just be a joyful thing.
I would love that. Where are you? I don't know where you're from.
I'm currently in in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, but we are actually in the process of relocating to Texas. So my husband and my youngest son are actually already in a home in Texas just north of San Antonio. And I'm back in North Carolina doing home repairs and getting the house ready to put on the market to sell, which is why you hear all that banging in the background. But, so, yeah, so we've been in San Antonio, so if you're ever down in the Texas way, you know, you'll have to be connected. You're welcome.
Well, that's wonderful.
Anytime, I'd love to meet you.
I would love to meet you, too. I do Skype if you do Skype.
Yes, of course I do.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
my Skype name is Angelica's Gifts. That's the name of my company, or what I use anyway as my umbrella for the very different things that I do is all under the name of Angelica's Gifts. And
Angelica, wait, no, and I'm not catching the last part. Angelica what?
Gifts, G-I-F-T-S. I'll spell it for you.
Okay.
It's A-N...
One word or two?
What? Oh,
One word or two?
one word. Because, well, on the internet it's one word for my .com, angelicasgifts.com.
And for Skype, is it just one word or two?
One word.
Okay, gotcha. And Angelica Gifts. Well, I'm Shelia Callaham, all one word on Skype.
Oh.
So, now, what is the title of your book, and when will it be released, your forthcoming book?
Okay, the title is Paradigm Busters, Reveal the Real You. And I'm going to be sending it to the publisher for the last time this next week. So it will take it's a POD book, print on demand, and so it'll be available within the next month.
Okay, yeah, so okay, good. So it would be really nice if maybe I could do this blog, because my book's definitely not going to be ready in the next month, but I could. If you let me know when your book's going to publish, I would be happy to go ahead and post this, as long as it doesn't interfere with something that I have to do for another timeline. But I could post it and promote your book as well.
Well, that would be wonderful. Now, I'm also, just for your information, I'm giving a workshop using my book as the textbook on May 21st in Seattle. And so I'm putting out information and interviews about people in that area coming to my class. It'll be a Saturday afternoon workshop where my book is partly a workbook where you actually write in it and has tools where you can charts and things to do, so it's not just reading it, it's experiential more. And that's what makes the difference. People can read books forever and ever, but if you talk about it, if you write about it, if you share it, if you use it and employ it in your experience, especially with others, and it becomes real into your life. So you have to have the energy moving. So I tried to write a book that was more experiential than just words.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. Absolutely. So when my book is released, there will be a resource section in the back where people can list any offerings that they might have, and so I don't know if you would like to submit something for that, but it could be, I don't know, like a discount coupon or just a reference. Maybe if you have any free PDFs that you're giving away or ebooks or anything like that, then I could include that and then write a little bio and link back to your website or whichever redirect you'd want me to do. So that would be an option for you. I'd wait for you to be included in the book as well if you would like. Well,
that would be wonderful. That's really very kind and generous of you. And I would I don't. I could give away free. My first book is Roses Have Thorns, and there's no reason why I couldn't give away those free. So because I've got them stacked in my garage.
It's all electronic now, and I'm not doing any gifts being mailed. It's just all anything that they can get electronically. So it would need to be.
Well, they could email me. I could give you my email, and they could ask for the book, and I'd be glad to send it.
Okay. Well, I'll make a note that as I'm polishing out I'm just going to be honest, I haven't quite started the resource part. So let me just, be transparent here. As I start putting the resources together, that's the last part of the book that I haven't done yet. and you can approve it and look at it together. How does that sound?
Okay. Do you have a time frame for that?
Yes. Let's see. How about? I'm just thinking. I'm trying to be realistic here. Because I'm in the process of putting my house on the market and moving to Texas, everything is just really, really unpredictable.
I understand that. My daughter just moved to Portland.
I'm going to say end of March, early part of April.
Okay.
Okay? I just being realistic. I've just got too many balls up in the air right now.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be nice if I could do it sooner than that?
Wouldn't it be nice what?
Wouldn't it be nice if I could do it sooner than that?
Oh, I don't know your schedule, but I know that moving is a very full-time job in itself, so trying to put a book together besides it's a challenge, I'm sure.
Yeah, plus moving across country, and oh my goodness, and I'll have a son graduating from college here in North Carolina in May, and oh, it's just, I could just go on and on and on, but I wouldn't want to bore you, because life is good, right, Marilyn? Life is good.
Well, I've discovered that there's nothing to be afraid of. You know, people are just friends I haven't met yet, and situations are just adventures today, and I look at situations like this as the lesson I need to work on right now, and how can I handle it so that I have a loving way to address it, and life goes so much more smoothly. It's marvelous.
Well, fantastic. Well, I thank you again for the time you took with me today, and I look forward to getting a transcript back and writing up this piece about you. It's very, very interesting, and I'm so grateful that you've found this path in life so that you can share and help others find their way too. So thank you again, Marilyn.
Well, you're so welcome. I know that's why I'm here, is to say I walked through it and you can do it too.
Absolutely. Well, you have a wonderful rest of your day. It's still early there.
Yes, I have some plans I've got to take care of for my book yet today. I'm still working on. So I really appreciated our talk, and I think that you're an amazing woman because you really understand what I'm saying. And yes, in past lives I've been a shaman, so I understand, you were working with that. You seem to have some good background in getting yourself where you are today, so I commend and applaud you and your spiritual growth. You sound like you really have accomplished a lot.
Well, thank you. And, it reminds me, I did make a little note to myself when you were talking, and that is really, life is living, in this physical reality. It's a process. It's a process, and we're always learning, we're always growing, and we're always evolving. And, even though we both come so far, we both have so much further to go, so long as we have our sights set to be all that we can be. And to me, that's really, really exciting.
Well, I'm looking forward to things really going into being gradually more harmonious, and things are going to, the crisis and chaos has to come up to leave. And so as we move into better places, I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, Marilyn, thanks so much, and I'll be in touch with you soon.
Well, thank you for all your support and help, and I will get back with you with a little blurb for your resources.
Okay. All right. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day yourself, and maybe we can stay in touch.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.